Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called, What's on Your Screen? I received an unsolicited call earlier this morning from a gentleman named Dan. Dan worked for Microsoft Security and was calling to let me know that my computer had been downloading malicious software. And because I was such a loyal customer, he would be walking me through the steps to remove the software and fix my computer. In case you didn't guess, Dan did not work for Microsoft. My computer was not infected and he was not going to help me. Our conversation began, Are you near your computer right now? Yes, why? I'd like to help you check it for issues. Okay, give me a minute. At this point, I spend a couple of minutes finding my laptop and getting it booted up. Really, it only took about 20 seconds. But Dan didn't need to know this. Once I was at my laptop, Dan continued. What do you see on your screen right now? What was that? I wanted to make sure I heard his question correctly. What do you see on your screen right now? Well, I see my desktop. At this point, Dan tried to continue with his script. But I had not told Dan everything that was on my screen, so I continued. There's a clock in the bottom left corner. The time says 10:30. There's a Wi-Fi signal with full bars, there's a volume meter but I have it muted right now. There's a battery indicator showing my laptop is 27% charged. Dan tried in vain to interrupt me, but there were still more things to tell him. There's an icon called My Computer, an icon called Recycle Bin, an icon called Google Chrome. You can see where this is going. I proceeded to read off to Dan each and every icon, shortcut, folder, and file that was currently displayed on my screen. Dan never got a chance to get a word in edgewise. Finally, after about 4 or 5 minutes of meticulously letting Dan know exactly what was on my screen, he asked me a question, Can you right-click on my computer? Sure, no problem. Do you know where that would be located? It should be on your desktop. I know, but I can't find it. Do you remember what it was next to when I described everything to you? It should be next to Recycle Bin. No, Google Chrome is next to the Recycle Bin. After a few more minutes, Dan successfully navigated me into the Start menu to open up a run box. Okay, there should be a field in the run box. Is it empty? No, it has something written already. After going through all the items in my run box history, Dan let me know that he would need to call me back in a few minutes. Despite my pleas for help, Dan hung up. Apparently I wasn't supposed to follow his directions so well. The next story is called, I Don't Work Here Anymore. I worked for a medical transportation company that had a contract with Medicaid. One of their many rules was that you could not provide any assistance to the patient inside of their house. One elderly lady had an old house with a very small foyer that you had to climb 3 steps to get to the main floor. The only other entrance was around back and up 2.5 flights of rickety steps to an old deck that opened into a bedroom. Upstairs. She's in a wheelchair. Common sense says take her in the front door, up 3 stairs and she's home on the level she lives on. Medicaid says take her up the outside stairs, dump her in the bedroom upstairs and let her worry about getting down to the living room level. We ignored their policy and took her in the front door anyway. A random inspection by a random inspector showed that we were not in compliance. We appealed, the inspector came out and saw the different options and decided that we had no case for appeal. Take her up the outside stairs. From then on, when the driver arrived at her house, he would get her out of the van on the sidewalk and then get on the radio and tell the boss to shove his stupid job. Now that he was no longer an employee, he was free to assist this lovely person into her front door and up the stairs. Once finished, they would come back to the van, tell the boss they'd reconsidered, and ask for their job back. The boss was always understanding and took them back, but very carefully noted the 10 to 15 minute break in their employment to show that the company remained in compliance. We had contests to see who could have the most dramatic I quit scene. Medicaid noted our activities, but couldn't put a handle on how to stop it. The third story is called, I was told to actually read the policy. I work for an office and we have an 8-week busy season with mandatory overtime with 12 to 14 hours per day. During this time, the company agrees to reimburse us for dinner, up to $13 per meal. We just have to submit a claim with our receipts at the end of the busy season. Food options around my work aren't great, so I usually brought my dinner from home. But sometimes I was too tired to cook after a long day, so out of the 8 weeks, I purchased maybe 10 meals. 3 of those meals I spent 50 cents over the limit. This resulted in a whopping $1.50 overage, which my manager said it was no big deal and that I could include on my expense claim. He signed off on it and everything. A few days after I submitted my report, the head office emailed me, saying they rejected my expense claim and that I could resubmit after I removed the $1.50 overage. I wrote back saying my manager was fine with the overage and even signed off on it. They responded by telling me that they do not allow overages under any circumstances, that the $1.50 must be removed or they wouldn't approve any of my meal expenses. They ended their email with the advice that I should actually read the company policy next time. Fine, they were right and I was wrong. So I decided I'd read the policy very thoroughly before redoing my expense claim. Yes, the policy clearly stated a $13 maximum on purchased meals. And what's this? The policy also allows $10 per day for meals you bring from home. I very happily removed the overage and added an additional $300 for the 30 meals I brought from home. I should read the company policy more often. The next story is called Boss Threatens to Have Me Fired. I work at a grocery store. My boyfriend and I both buy our groceries there, and sometimes he'll see me and maybe wave or say hi. We don't chat or waste any time unless I also happen to be going on break. My department manager didn't know I was gay when he hired me, and he figured it out when he asked me who the guy that was waving to me was. He made a weird face, not necessarily disgusted, but you get the point. Anyway, anytime my boyfriend would enter the store after that, he would keep his eye on him. Now, if he were to wave to me, my manager would start to berate me and try and make it out like I'm slacking when I'm just stocking shelves and smiling in his direction. Nothing bad at all. He didn't care at all prior to learning he's my boyfriend. After a week he has a private talk with me, saying my boyfriend is causing too much of a distraction and he shouldn't shop here while I'm on shift, and that if something didn't change I might be let go. I was mad, told my boyfriend about it, he was even more mad. I didn't really want to make a big deal out of it though. This was a temporary job and I probably won't even have it longer than a year or two. So I decided to prank my manager instead of getting into legal or corporate stuff. We have other gay friends that shop there. Crazy enough, we look just like regular people, so no one would realize, including my manager. Sure, my boyfriend won't shop there, but what about other gay people? That shouldn't matter, he just doesn't want my significant other distracting me at work. So, I mentioned what happened to my 5 friends who mentioned it to their friends, and so on. The next shift I bore witness to 30 extremely flamboyant and openly gay men and women in the store. My manager was trying to hide in the back, but every customer needed manager's assistance for the most mundane questions. He ended up going home early, but after that shock, he actually stopped berating me for the past couple of months. He might just be happy that I'm not very open about my sexuality, so he can choose to ignore it. The next story is called Put Him on the Phone. My father passed away on Father's Day 2012. He was divorced and living alone, and I am an only child. So that means that I had to wrap up all of his affairs. This story centers around us trying to get his utilities cancelled. I called in to see what we had to do to get him to cancel. The lady I spoke with on the phone said to send in his certified death certificate. I sent in the certified copy of his death certificate the next day. The next month, I got another bill. I called again and a new woman answered. She said that because I wasn't on the account that she had to speak with the account holder. I informed her that the account holder has passed away, but she wouldn't budge. I had to make an appointment with a supervisor so she could speak to him herself in person. I showed up at the Board of Public Utilities with another certificate and his ashen remains in a clear bag that they returned his remains in. I plopped them down on the center of her desk and said when she talked to him to tell him that I loved him for me. The woman went pale, flew out her chair, and called the cops. When they showed up, she claimed that I had assaulted her. And yes, my dad's remains were still sitting in the middle of her desk with the certificate. The cops questioned me as to why I would do that. I told them the story. The supervisor's boss was called in and they all stepped away from the desk for a private talk. While they were talking, the cops came over to talk to me. They said that I shouldn't take human remains out in public. But there were no laws that were broken. I said that I agreed with them that it was extreme. But she insisted to speak with him in person. By then, they were done talking between themselves. The supervisor's boss kissed up to me and got it taken care of. But the story isn't over yet. I had to call back a few days later to get utilities back to the house in my name. When the person on the phone saw the address and my name, I was immediately put on hold. The supervisor's boss that finally helped me got on the phone. She sucked up to me and waived all of the fees that come with setting up utilities. Just as the call was ending, she informed me that she was again so sorry for the employee's lack of compassion. She said that the employee was terminated and again she is so very sorry. The last story is called You Start at 7, You Finish at 7. I used to work at a car company about 3 years ago as a telephonist on the night shift doing 12-hour shifts. It was pretty good, 4 days working, 3 days off, and the pay was decent. However, most people didn't take their job seriously. They would call in sick or just not show up for work at all, and especially on nights when there were only 4 of us. If one person didn't show up, you felt it. I was a good employee. I showed up early, logged in and started working usually from 6:30. I never took a sick day. I changed my holidays to fit the company's needs and worked any overtime they needed me to work. I was so dedicated to my role that I had worked on multiple occasions over 18 hours as people wouldn't show up for shifts and they needed cover. It was my first real job and I believed in the company. I used the train system to get to and from work and always planned out my routes around as much as I could to avoid being late. However, on this particular day, they were running a reduced service due to breakdowns. A lot of the trains had been repaired using less than stellar parts and the wheels kept sticking to the track when they hit the brakes, causing wear on the wheels in specific spots. So a lot of trains were out of commission. On top of that, the train I was on had been stopped due to a signal issue for 20 minutes. This led me to being late. I had shown up about 10 minutes late to the start of my shift. Before I had even sat down, my manager was giving me grief. Apparently, he was mad because I had stopped other telephonists going home as someone had to work 10 extra minutes to cover my shift as 2 people were ill and couldn't make it in. Now I hate being late. I was already mad that I was late. But my manager giving me trouble as soon as I walked through the door just irritated me even more. My reply to him was as follows: apologies that I was late. However, how many times have I ever been late? I show up 30 minutes before my shift every day. I have stayed late to covers days before the train had an issue and it was out of my control. I was stuck underground with no signal to call or text to let you know. My manager didn't care. His reply to me was, "You start at 7, you finish at 7. You are in early on your own time. Those times you have stayed behind you have been paid and no one asked you to." "Okay then," was my reply. The next day was extremely busy. My colleague had left and only one of the morning guys had shown up for his shift to take over. As he sat down, I began to pack up. At 7 on the dot I left. As I usually helped out when this happened, everyone was surprised and had asked me where I was going. My only reply was, "I start at 7, I finish at 7. This was my final shift and so I was off for the next few days. On my first shift back I get pulled into the office by my manager with the human resource manager. They asked me why I left a single telephonist on their own. I looked at my manager and repeated the exact same words that were said to me. My manager informed me I start at 7 and I finish at 7. The look on the human resource manager's face was priceless. She was angry. She already had a staff issue to deal with and on top of that, one of her most helpful staff members had been mugged off by a manager. She told me to go back to my desk and she needed to speak to the manager in question. 20 minutes later the manager came back in looking absolutely defeated. He never said anything to me again about being late. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.